Hello, and welcome to our paranormal podcast, The Wisping Hour. We are friendly ghouls next door. I'm Sheri,
And I'm Tipsy.
and today we have a set of creepy stories for you. You'll hear about the spirit who calls 911, the mystery of Roanoke, something's caught on camera, echoes of the Civil War, a persistent spirit, and the static child. And that's what we've got for you. So, how have you been this week? Anything exciting happened this week for you, Tipsy?
Not a whole lot. Typical work week.
I got
So,
you.
what about you?
Nothing too exciting. Yeah, I this week has been kind of work-wise has been kind of rough.
Yeah,
Lack of sleep, but that's all right. I think
I feel you there.
that's just normal for me.
Right.
I use my days off and try and catch up. Sometimes it works.
Sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel you. Alrighty.
All
You
right.
gonna start
And
us off?
so, yes, I will. And I'm starting off with one that I think you'll really enjoy. So in this story, there's a man who's been a paramedic for about 22 years, and he DM'd his personal story to the TikToker Kelsey C. Also, I think you're going to find this one pretty interesting. So, what happened was a paramedic named Al at 1 a.m. was dispatched along with three officers to a call. So, what happened was the 911 dispatcher received a call from a woman that was saying it was cold and dark, and she didn't know where she was. So the caller wasn't able to give any kind of description of her location either. But the cell phone was pinging though, so the 911 operator was able to track it and send out the support. And that was where the paramedic comes in. So the dispatcher sends them to that area, but the whole time she's still speaking with the woman on the phone.
Right.
So the police and the paramedic, they get to that area, but they couldn't find anyone. There wasn't really anything of note in the area, like so no immediate buildings, but they do see a school up ahead and they think to themselves, so they decide to check to see if there's anything going on at the school, to see if there's any cars or anybody in the area there to try and figure out who is making the call. So when they get there, no one's there and there doesn't seem to be anything going on. So while they're standing around trying to figure out where to go from there, the dispatcher is able to link the cell phone number to an address. And so they give that to the responders. And so that's when they decide to head there next. But when they get there, they knock on the door and an elderly man answers. And it's obvious they had woken him up and he was pretty confused about why they were there. So at this point, the dispatcher now knows the woman's name, the address, the phone number it's linked to, and it's even pinging from a cell phone tower near the house. So when the man answers the door, they ask him if he knew this woman. And he says, yes, that's my wife. So then they ask him, is she okay? And the man looks at them and tells them she passed away a year ago.
I knew it.
Yeah. So now
Ugh,
the police, yeah, they've got to do their due diligence, like checking
right.
to make sure, yeah, she truly passed or there's no odd foul play or anything like that.
Oh my gosh.
And they were able to verify his wife had passed away of natural causes a year prior. And so they explained to him that they were getting a phone call from his wife's cell phone. And on the call, the caller was saying that it was cold, dark, and they didn't know where they were. And that's when they realize, hey, it's the middle of summer and it's definitely not cold. And so he tells them there's no way it's possible they were getting a call from that cell phone because he still has his wife's cell phone in the house in a drawer and it still works.
So
It
then
even
how?
has, yeah, it even has the same number and everything. And that confused him even more, as you can imagine. So at this point, the responders believe that somehow this is just a terrible prank. And they begin to apologize and they leave. So they leave there, but the story isn't over yet. The entire time they had been talking with this man, the dispatcher was still on the phone with the caller. It sounded like the woman was in an empty room or a small space because it was echoing. All she kept saying was, I don't know where I am, it's cold, and it's dark, and I need help. Eventually, the woman ended the call with the dispatcher simply by saying, I have to go back now. It's at that point that the paramedic, police, and dispatcher have no idea what happened or could explain any of it.
Oh my gosh. It's so creepy. I got
Yeah.
goosebumps. Been sitting
Yeah.
here.
I thought
Oh
you'd
my
like that one.
gosh. Yeah, that's how on earth they couldn't ping it specifically in the school anywhere? That's wild that it would ping at the school.
Yeah, I guess what happened was it initially got like a overall area,
Oh, it
and
was a
then
triangulation.
like a triangulation, and then
Okay.
eventually they narrowed it down to
They
that
okay.
one. Yeah.
Oh, geez. How odd. Yeah. Of course, sometimes you hear about you hear about things coming through, well, I mean, ghost hunters all the time use those electronic devices to try and
Right.
catch readings or to try and get some sort of like radio to use for wording for the spirits to use for words and such, but whoo, creepy. Oy. I still I'm kind of shaking that one off. Well, my story's not as eerie, but it does have a little bit more of the paranormal aspect. So, the Roanoke disappearances, this was back in the 1500s, late 1500s.
Okay.
Uh, Roanoke, let's see, not county, Roanoke colony was established in about 1585. Governor, I don't know if he was self proclaimed or voted, but, the governor of the colony, he had to make a supply run back to Britain because winter was coming and there was gonna be death and famine and stuff. Well, it took him 3 years because there was such I guess that fall, there was such a storm and such, so,
Yeah.
it took him 3 years to go to and from.
That makes sense.
And
It's not like they had planes just to hop on
right.
back in the
Yeah, I
day.
know those great big ships, but I mean, they can move when the wind's right. I guess it would be harder coming west than it would be. I feel heading east. I always feel like when you head east, it's just a hair faster. And I don't know if that has anything to do with rotation, but on the water anyway. Anyhow, the governor comes back and he finds the colony has just poofed. It's just up and gone. There was no signs of struggle, no signs of violence, no signs of battle or anything. They were just gone. And when he wrote this in his journal, it became one of the biggest mysteries of North Carolina's. So, a lot of speculation around, oh, it was disease and famine. Oh, it was they were attacked by local natives. Well, if they had been attacked, there would have been signs of battle. If there had been disease and famine, there would have been bodies. But there was
Right.
nothing. And now Roanoke, they are also there's an island off of Roanoke, and I think that's where the Croatoan Indians were. Now, Croatoan, the reason that word is so uh, popular and surrounds this Roanoke colony disappearance so heavily is because that was the only piece of evidence that they found of any sort of lead of anything engraved on a tree, the word Croatoan.
People think that, what did people think happened, initially?
Well, initially, there was that they believe they assimilated to the Croatoans. So
Ah,
they basically, because things were so bad in the colony itself, they just packed up what they could, and they Croatoans were a peaceful people, and they helped them. They even helped them take out, well, not take out, but help them negotiate deals and kind of try and speak with the Roanoke tribe because there was a Roanoke Indian tribe there too where they settled, and they were more aggressive. They definitely did not take kindly to outsiders, and so there was that exchange. Now, here in the last 10 years, a self-proclaimed amateur archaeologist, he and a colleague of his, they have this whole museum surrounding the Roanoke mystery, and they think they've finally cracked it, which
oh,
I don't know. It's a give and take because I could see, like I said, they assimilated with Croatoans, but they found on the Croatoan island what they call the hammer scale. And hammer scale is basically shavings off of forgery stuff. And the Croatoans didn't have that kind of technology. So they believe that that was the heaviest piece of evidence that the Roanokes just they assimilated into the Croatoans and that was it. And they never tried to come back and say anything to the governor or anything.
Uh,
So there was that speculation, but I don't know. His journal was very in depth about it, and he looked around, he asked around, and there just wasn't much of anything to be said about what happened to the people. So there's still that mystery of it may have not even been the Croatoans because, he, aside from it being engraved in the tree, that was about it. And then, of course, there was the other tree that had the engraving of CRP, and nobody to this day even knows what those initials could have been for, what it
I
could have been
gotcha.
even an acronym for. So, yeah, it's kind of village up and disappearing.
So the second tree probably wasn't like a teenager carving on the tree or something like that
Well,
back in the
see,
day?
that's what I kind of thought. I was like, oh, CRP, those are initials, but nobody with those initials even were in that colony. So it was just kind of a wild little blip
Yeah,
of a piece of something.
I
So,
gotcha.
but yeah, so that was it. That's all mine. Go on.
Okay. Okay. I've got another little bit of a story here. So this one comes from the Reddit poster Horror Ladder 6264. And in this one, the cameras caught something. So what happened was this poster's family, they have a house deep in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. And the poster and their friend both decide to have a sort of a summer getaway at their father's house right after he passed away. I'm sorry, grandfather's house right after he passed away. So they arrived, and when they arrived with their mother, one of the girls' mothers, rather, I should say. And then they staked out the grandfather's room because it had the biggest bed. And their grandfather had had cameras set up all around the house, set up to look outside. So they felt pretty safe. So right next to the bed was a tablet that controlled all the security cameras in the grandfather's room. So that night, when they arrived, basically they spent the night telling scary stories to each other. Because, you're in a house
Right.
off in the woods. Why not? Good idea. At around 1 a.m., they thought they saw something from the camera outside the window of the room they were sleeping in. So they stared at it for a while. They eventually saw a bug flying by, and they were just convinced it was probably just an animal or even another bug or something like that.
Yeah.
So about 15 minutes later, the poster, their friend her friend realized that she had left her Heath candy bar out on the deck of the house and wanted to go get it. They considered just leaving it outside, but then remembered there had been a ton of mountain lion sightings in the area recently, and they didn't want to attract any wildlife. So, wanting to be safe, of course, they checked all the cameras first, and then both of them ran outside to get the candy rather. While they were there, they heard noises. It sounded like something was walking and crunching leaves in the woods nearby, and the more they stopped to listen to it, it sounded like something that was walking on two legs and not four. But that was odd for them because they knew the nearest house was about a mile up the mountain. So there was no reason for anybody to be out there. And the only other person with them was the poster's mom, who was asleep in the guest bedroom. So they ran back inside and locked the doors. And the poster's friend joked they should check the cameras and see if it was a bear. So they immediately went back to the grandfather's bedroom and they looked on the cameras. And they didn't see a bear. What they did see standing at the tree line which was right by their window. It looked like a person standing and staring, so it had like a humanoid shape, but the camera quality and the lighting was poor, so they couldn't make out any features. They just could identify it was humanoid. So, terrified, they looked out the window of that room and they didn't see anything. And then they looked back at the camera and they were gone. Whatever was on the camera was gone. So, they thought about waking the mother up and they decided not to because it wasn't there
Mm.
anymore. And so, like, the rest of the night, they were freaked out and a little bit uneasy. At first, they tried to see if they could rewind the camera in some way to recheck what they saw, but they couldn't find a way to do that. So eventually, they stopped telling each other that there are ghost stories
Yeah.
and they went to sleep, and they just told themselves there was probably just a bear or some other animal because they only saw that one time.
Right?
So when they woke up, they told the mother the entire story and asked her if she knew how to rewind the camera footage. She then told them that the cameras had been down for a while because no one had been there to watch them since their grandpa had died. So they wouldn't have been recording and shouldn't have been recording at all. They still worked, but there was no way to check what they both saw
Oh my
that
gosh.
night on the cameras. So they still don't know if it was a person or just maybe their
That's
imagination.
that's wild. Oh my gosh. They didn't give like a very large description of it though. Just humanoid.
Just
Was it
humanoid,
pretty
yeah.
tall? They say anything about it being
That's
tall?
yeah, they didn't say that. All they really said it was a humanoid.
A Wendigo.
Yeah, but you know how when you look at something, like,
Right.
being a
Sometimes you'll make a
connection?
personification out of something
Yeah,
that's, you know.
but it is yeah, but it is hard to, like, really mistake a humanoid something for a four-legged something.
Right. Yeah, that's ugh. I wonder if it was like a shaved bear. I know they look eerie. Mangy.
True.
But well, that's interesting. I wonder what it looked like.
Yeah,
I would have been creeped. I definitely would have stopped. I would have been waking my mother up. I've been like, "Get up, there is something outside."
yeah.
Man,
I probably would have done the same thing too, because
yeah. I would not have
like,
waited until morning.
cause if I knew, like, the nearest house was over like, a mile or so up, and it's 1 AM,
Right? Not to mention, so the cameras weren't supposed to be working
or
when they picked it up?
they weren't supposed to be recording at all.
I'll be darned. That's wild. Ooh, spooky dooky. Your first one, that one I still got little goosebumps over, but that one was pretty good. Oh my gosh. So my Civil War ghost story, this is a personal story. I was around 11 at the time. My cousin was having a birthday party. He was 9, turning 9, and him and 2 of his little friends all came out. We all were celebrating. He had this beautiful patch of land just south of alongside Civil War Road, off of Civil War Road. And, they haven't lived over there for a long time, but his, uh his father used to cut all the landscaping and do all the landscaping and such so we could ride four-wheelers and play, and we came up with the idea of, "Oh, let's go camping for your birthday, and we'll all sit out underneath the stars." It was a middle of June. Well, it was end of June. And so anyhow, got the tent pitched and everything. We all, of course, this is back in the 90s, we all had those Game Boys. So probably would have been early 2000s now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
Oh.
to entertain yourself, right? There's only much star watching you could do.
Right, right. And so we're all in this tent. It's me, my cousin, his 2 friends, and then my cousin's 2 dogs, Sassy and Sally. They're both lab mixes, but Sassy was huge and Sally's this little petite thing.
Was that either a big tent or was it pretty crowded?
Yeah, we were close knit. I was practically sleeping on the dog until she got up to move. Yeah, so let me, hold on, I have to collect my thoughts. So we get in the tent. One of his friends is passed out, sleeping already. And the other 3 of us, we're starting to get there and we're like, okay, we're gonna power down our little DSs and Game Boys or whatever we had. Soon as we did, and the lights went dark, it was dark for maybe a minute, if that. All of a sudden the dogs both perked up and they start barking. And we had, they had the screen on those tents where you can zip it back and then you've got a ventilation screen for
Yeah.
inside the tent. We only had that open. We didn't cover the entirety of it up. As soon as the dogs started barking, we all got up. Like, what is going on? and all of a sudden, a pair of boots walks right by the front of the tent. And I'm talking, it was crunch, you heard the steps, all of it, right by the tent. And I remember seeing these long pantsuits. It was a pantsuit with a white pinstripe down the side. Couldn't really make out the top of the boot, but it was a straight-legged pinstripe pant. I immediately my dad was a big Civil War history buff, loved all of that. I knew immediately, "Oh my gosh, that was a Union soldier." And that was we all were frozen, and I'm looking at my cousin and his friends, I'm like, "Did you guys see the same thing I seen?" And they're like, "Yeah, can we go to the house now?" Because 'Cause
I
they're all
bet.
9, you know? Of course, big older cousin, I start the train up, and they caboose behind me up to the house, and we pound until my aunt let us in, but, oh my lord, yeah, that was probably it wasn't the first experience I had, but as far as close, that was probably the closest because it would have been about a foot away from my face, a foot and a
Oh,
half
wow.
at most. Because I was
Yeah.
sitting the dogs and I were all on one side of the tent, but we were closest to the exit, and the boys were all kind of in the back and around with Sally, the other dog, back there. And so, yeah, it was super close for me, but yeah, that was I'd put my life on it that it was like a ripple, and it was a soldier walking. And I mean,
S
that was all the footsteps we heard was just what he did in front of our tent, and that was it. We heard nothing else after.
so
So
when
yeah, he
you
poofed.
Yeah. So when you, like, looked outside and you got outside of the tent, you didn't see anybody else around at all?
No, and
And
my
y'all were
aunt and
just
uncle were asleep in the house.
uh, and y'all just kinda noped out of there
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah, we're like, "Skedaddle."
I
"Bravo,
get it.
Rocky."
Yeah, I think was this a site where there was, like, a battle or something?
Oh, yeah, the Battle of Carthage was I mean, Battle of Carthage took place probably not even 2 miles north of us.
Okay.
So, where she lived was right on that land.
Okay.
There's a Battle of Carthage memorial at the corner of Baseline and Civil War Road, and that memorial, we could walk to it. It would take us about an hour, but we could walk to it. So we were right yeah, it was right all there.
You said one of one of you was fast asleep. I assume the dogs is what, woke him up?
Yeah, yeah, the dogs woke
Did
if we weren't awake before,
you were awake
we were
then?
awake then, and I think he was the only one that didn't see him, but me and the other
Uh,
2, we saw him, but he was
okay.
still delirious and more in a panic of why the dogs were barking,
I
and we were all
gotcha.
frozen.
So he missed out on the encounter, only heard about afterwards. I
Right,
gotcha.
right. Yeah, yeah, we talked about that for a long time because it was that was eerie, and especially for a bunch of us kids, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Anyhow, I did have just as a convalesce tangent to the Civil War, I did have my great-great-grandmother had a house, north of there, and she saw the cannon fire from the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how close they were.
Yeah,
'Cause,
that's close.
yeah, it was close. It was wild, but I could only imagine what that would have been like. So, yeah, when you have something heavy like that happen on anywhere, in a home, on land, anything, I feel like it leaves an impression when you have a lot of energy and there's a lot of that essence. Because
Yeah.
we produce radio waves ourselves. We just don't even realize it. Vibrations, if you will, not necessarily, maybe not radio waves, but vibrations. And when you're in, a battle like that, and that was a heavily emotion battle because of brother being against brother, family being against family, and especially in little old Missouri, you know,
Yeah.
That whole Battle of Carthage was just it was some. A lot of
Yeah.
people were on opposite sides there, and so I can imagine that the emotional toll on the land itself, it's gonna echo.
Yeah. That's why I kind of view it as like maybe echoes of
Yeah,
things. Kind of like maybe if you have like a haunting of somebody just doing the same thing constantly, like going
yeah.
up some stairs that, that's all you
Something
ever
that people
see.
do all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yes. Yeah, it's crazy, but
that's cool. That would have been interesting for sure.
yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean,
How old were you? You said they were around
I was
9?
11. I'm 2
Okay.
years older than my cousin. Yeah,
Okay.
so I was
So,
11. Still pretty young.
yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think that I would have stayed in a situation like that, but I probably would have noped out too. Pretty sure I would have
Yeah,
noped out too.
yeah. It was definitely, "Nah, we out. We're dipping. This ain't what I wanted." Not
Right?
at that point. I was looking for sleep.
I just signed up for stars and Game Boys and
Right.
sleep, not a spirit.
Yeah. And he's so close to the 4th of July that it's just, his birthday is. So,
Yeah.
yeah, all that right there. I imagine it probably is the worst right there in the summer, in the heat of summer. I
Oh,
bet it
yeah.
echoes more.
I can see that. Wow. Okay. Well, I've got one more. This one is a little bit creepy. It's got a creepy element to it for sure.
Okay. I've liked all your stories so far.
Awesome.
They're good.
Excellent. All right. Well, this last one here. So this comes also from a Reddit poster, K Mindo 4. So in this story, a personal story, basically they had several encounters with the same spirit. And they all are at kind of different time periods. And so it starts off basically one night when he was 10 years old. He woke up to the sound of his bedroom door opening and then followed by the feeling of somebody sitting on the bed. Like, you know how when you're in the bed, like it dips a little and you can feel that. And he even felt his leg kind of grazed a little bit as the bed sunk under the weight of whoever's sitting on it. And he thought it was his mom until he opened his eyes. So instead, he found an eyeless boy with black empty sockets, about his age, sitting at the foot of the bed. The spirit extended his hand, and in it was a little box. So he had just woken up and he was definitely startled. And I'm pretty sure he was a little bit out of it. So he reached out for the box, and the little boy pulled the box back. And so again, he reached out for the box, the poster, and said, "Give it." So then he blinked, basically, maybe trying to rub a bit of a sleep in his eyes, something like that. So when he opened his eyes, the little boy was gone, but the imprint was still there at the edge of the bed. And so
Oh my
about
gosh.
yeah. So there's so he wasn't just imagining it, or he could tell himself he was imagining it because there was an imprint. So about 5 years later, his girlfriend was over doing some homework. And so his girlfriend had finished with her homework and wanted to take a nap. So she was napping in his bedroom while waiting for her parents to come and get her. So when they arrived, he went up to wake her, and then suddenly she opened her eyes and she stared at the upper corner of the room where the wall met the ceiling, and she pointed at it, and then she immediately closed her eyes, and it seemed like she just went back to sleep. So then he shook her again, and this time, like, she seemed to really be awake. So he explained to her what she did, and then she said, "Up on the wall, I saw a little boy with no eyes. He was there staring down at me." And
Oh,
so yeah.
Jesus.
So yeah. So he was freaked out a bit about this, and that's when he told his story about his own experience with the eyeless boy. So then about 5 more years has passed, and he's still actually with the same girlfriend, only now they have a 2-year-old daughter, and they were living in his parents' house in his old room. And what had happened was his daughter had started waking up around the same time every night, and she would just talk. It seemed like she was talking in a
Oh,
particular direction, like a focus kinda talking. So after a while, he started noticing that she would have the same conversation every night. So, like, just playfully, because he thought, "Hey, probably an imaginary friend or something." And he finally asked her who she was talking to, and she said, "It's a little boy. He's lost, and he's looking for his mommy." So she continued to talk to this little boy until they finally got their own place and moved out later on that year.
whoo, my Jesus, yeah. That one was definitely stationed there, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah, that one wasn't going anywhere.
Oh my
Might take a
gosh.
little bit of sage, to
Well, from the sounds of it, it sounded like he was way more into the other boy than he was the girl. Because his appearance towards the poster was right there, at
Yeah.
hand's reach, and then his girlfriend seeing opposite of the wall, that made me think, "Oh, he didn't like her,"
Yeah,
because he was
kinda.
distanced himself
That makes
and,
sense.
still wanted to watch, but he distanced himself, and, man,
Yeah.
my
And he
gosh.
seemed and, whatever it was seemed to be pretty comfortable more comfortable around probably kids. It makes sense if he was a
Right,
kid.
because it was a little boy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, wild. Oof. I have one similar, the static child, that we've decided to call this story. Personal story again. I will say I was about 9. So this would have even been before the Civil War boots. When I was 9, my mother and I lived in another town. We had a white brick home and it was a new home. We were the first family to ever lived in it. And so, there wasn't any history to be had. But me and her we saw the same thing, but in entirely different aspects. And I'll
Oh.
explain. So I'll explain what I seen, and then I'll tell you what she saw. My brother was born at this time, but he was just a baby, and he had night terrors all the time, constantly. His father wasn't really in the picture a whole lot, and so, uh, it was just the 3 of us at home most of the time. His dad just, he went to work elsewhere, and he'd be gone for a time, either delivering stuff or whatnot. He kinda worked odd end things all throughout. And anyhow, so he had these night terrors, and, my mom would say all the time when I got older, she goes, "Oh, I always prayed that you never heard them because I was afraid you wouldn't get good sleep and that you'd be worried and all this other and stuff," and I never did. I never got woken up by his night terrors. Always slept through them. And one night I was woken to him, and I opened my eyes and I sat up in bed and I rubbed the sleep out. And all of a sudden I saw this child-sized, child-formed thing of static. That's the best description I've ever had. White static. And it was moving. Like, even though the shape wasn't, the static was moving. And I remember it clear as day. But I felt a calm. I felt a peace. I didn't have nothing riled in me to be scared or anything like that. He just stood at my doorway, and my mom always left it cracked when I would go to bed. He shut the door, and then he walked over to the side of my bed, and I rolled over and went back to sleep. Now, years later, my mom started to tell this story, and I go, "Wait, when was this?" And she told me it was about the same time. When you hear her side of it, it was the same night because there was no other explanation for it. She, of course, heard my little brother screaming in his night terror, and she got up immediately. But when she did, she felt off, and she was like, "There's something watching me." And lo and behold, there was a little boy or a little human form, a little child form of static, but it crawled on the ceiling toward the door from above her bed. And she got up. When she had got up and she saw it and she saw it move, she ran because she thought it was going after my little brother.
Oh, wow.
As soon as she opened her door, my door shut. And she went in there and coddled my brother and everything and got him calmed down and back to sleep. But she went to go check on me and open my door again, and I was asleep and stuff, and so she just she had a much different experience than what I
Yeah.
did because it terrified her. It was not a calming it wasn't a calming essence of any sort. And so, yeah, from then on, it was just kind of that's what we remember, but it never happened again. We never saw the static child again, and that was the end of it. Of course, about 2 years later, we moved, so we don't know if anybody else ever had seen or experienced that prior. Because when we moved, her parents moved into the house. They really turned it into a beautiful home. But they never talked about having any kind of experiences like that, and my grandmother is heavily Catholic raised. And
Oh,
so, you know, anything like that would have been brought into conversation at some point because she things like that just subside, and which is, I don't see how anybody could. I had no idea mom had even had that experience until she started to tell her mother. And then I just happened to be in the room, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what?" And I remembered it all, and I was like, "This is what I seen," and they were both flabbergasted because it was a wild circumstance. But
yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny how you had 2 totally separate experiences of the same thing. That's cool, though.
of the same thing, yeah. She was terrified that it was gonna go after the baby, and I was calm and put back to bed. So, I don't know, I always thought it was kind of a little guardian angel. Because angels I don't
Yeah.
think would have much of a they'd have a shape and a form, but we don't know what they look like and whatnot. So it was kind of always that was kind of what I laid it to rest for or as. But
Yeah.
yeah, my little static child. It was wild.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have so
Well,
many and they're all very wildly different.
yeah,
Well,
definitely sounds
there's
like it.
there's two of them that are there's two of them that are time.
Sounds good. All right.
Well, what are you
Well,
thinking now?
so definitely had some interesting stories today for sure. Maybe if they find out some more about Roanoke, you can update us on that if you get any more details, if they ever figure out some more
Well,
things.
even what they've even what the recent archaeological findings have done, it's they're only theories. So, who
Yeah.
knows? Because the
Yeah.
Croatoans never I don't think there was anything. I'll have to look to see if there was anything the Croatoans left to even indicate that they took in a colony. Because that would be where I would look, or if there were stories about them taking in a colony. It probably wasn't a very profound thing in the tribal societies to take in outsiders, and I'm sure it probably caused issues with other surrounding tribes, but who knows?
Yeah.
So,
Alrighty. Well, I think that could probably wrap up the episode for today, but I don't have anything else to impart before we call it.
nope, I'm excited for the next one.
Hopefully, I can have some equally creepy ones, but I'll definitely at least bring something interesting. So, and
Okay.
definitely thank you everyone who decided to join us today on the first podcast for this. But I definitely hope if you enjoyed it, you would consider liking and subscribing and join us for the next one. And you'll also be able to find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Uh, so watch or listen to us however you like.